Hey, Dylan, how did the hacker escape the FBI? He ran somewhere.
Quinn, we're not alone
We're not. We have a special guest
for
today.
once.
Yeah, a great guest. One of my coworkers, Tom.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Here he is.
Yeah, we're
You're
great. How
doing
are you?
good. So, first podcast appearance here for Tom. This is not our first guest, but first off-season guest. So, we'll say it's a first just for specialty reasons. But it'll be very exciting here. So, Tom you're a big Bills fan, I believe, right?
Oh yeah. Before I moved here, I lived in Buffalo for 12 years, so Buffalo Bills, it's all I know for football.
Love it. And so we are going to go over. You saw Quinn and I did the NFC East last week. We're going to do the AFC East this week. And like we keep saying, we'll get other guests on for each division here. We figured since Tom's a diehard Bill fan, perfect occasion here. But before we get to that, this was a pretty big week in football in the NFL because it was NFL free agency week. And me and Quinn last week talked about some big trades that happened beforehand. And I posted a quick short at TikTok right afterwards on DK Metcalf becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler because literally it was like, I believe, like 15 minutes afterwards, Quinn, I texted you like, DK Metcalf's a Steeler. Of course, we missed it when we talked about all the other big moves, but you could see my reaction on the video above. But there's some other notable free agency boot in the free agent market, obviously, here. We'll start with the quarterbacks. And two of probably the big ones here in free agency is Justin Fields is now a New York Jet, and Sam Darnold is now a Seattle Seahawk here. I love how NFL kind of breaks this news as if like, oh, it's a groundbreaking thing. Like, oh, the Jets and Seahawks, they're contenders now that they got these. But, it's always got to be in the headlines when they go to teams here. So let's start here with the new guest here, Tom. What did you think about some of these quarterback acquisitions last week in free agency?
Definitely the big one of Justin Fields on the Jets. I feel the reaction to it is similar to what happened with Aaron Rodgers when he moved to the Jets. There was all this hype around it. And unfortunately for them, it didn't seem to work out, which worked out in the Bills' favor. It's always exciting to see these quarterbacks moving to new places. Darnold going to the Seahawks when they seem to be, refreshing their receiver room. It's exciting to see what's going on and outside of the division, also in the division. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you in terms of NFL free agency week when it first opens up always gets exciting. And I think that along with the deadlines and everything made it some of the more intriguing things we've seen over the past few seasons, especially this offseason has been one of the more intriguing ones. But Quinn, what did you think about the quarterback acquisitions, specifically Darnold and Justin Fields?
I think the Darnold thing's interesting because he had arguably the best wide receiver in the league with Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison is no joke either, and like a pretty good offensive line. Now he's going to the Seahawks where, they're just rebuilding their wide receiver room. JSN's very good, and now they have traded for or picked up Cooper Kupp, which is another interesting move. But yeah, like Tom was saying, it's kind of interesting. They seem to almost be like partially rebuilding their offense, but then we'll see how Darnold does. I don't really expect great things, but hopefully I'm surprised. And we know I'm not a big fan of Justin Fields, so I don't think It's gonna fit with the Jets' seemingly team
Oh,
motto of get
gee,
like
really?
mediocre kind of bad talent. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll be good, right? No, not really. Um, but yeah, I don't foresee either quarterback doing great things, but definitely interesting moves. Definitely exciting to shake it up. Quarterbacks are the most important position in football.
Well, I feel like despite the Jets' disappointing season record wise, you would feel that Fields has the better team roster wise than Darnold. It sucks kind of the situation Sam's been put in with a rough O line. And yeah, like you said, Tom, it's weird how the Seahawks look like they're rebuilding, trading all their receivers, and they're like, no, we're competing. Let's go get Darnold. Like, what are we doing, Seattle? Are we trying to make it playoffs, or are we trying to get the number one pick next year? I don't get. I mean, it definitely is an upgrade over Gino, but not a major upgrade. And Fields, it's kind of 50-50 with me because I think it could be either I think it's a decent ceiling but a very low floor for Fields with the Jets. A lot of people are saying that's who they should have drafted in the first place instead of Zach Wilson. A lot of people back then had him as the second quarterback coming out of that draft. It can be a good fit. It's a lot better of a fit than Rodgers in terms of Fields' ability to run. But again, it's that Jets stench that you just can't trust them to do anything good. So that one we'll just have to see. That one I'm kind of 50-50 on. But yeah, interesting. Not big time quarterbacks, but some on the move to new teams. Wide receiver wise, like I said, Metcalf and Devontae were the big trades. Some skill positions here. Najee Harris is now a Charger, which is a very interesting move. He got released by the Steelers, and now he is part of the Jim Harbaugh running back carousel. We're going to run the ball whether you like it or not. Aaron Jones is still a Minnesota Viking there. Again, another thing in the receiver room, Cooper Kupp is now a Seattle Seahawk. That is a very interesting move as well after being released by the Rams. And yeah, basically skill position wise, again, like just knitting picks here and there. But start with Quinn this time. What did you think about any skill position moves, specifically Kupp on the move and Najee on the move?
I thought Kupp was very interesting going to a divisional rival in the Seahawks from the Rams. I mean, they weren't able to get a trade. I feel like nowadays when teams are like, oh yeah, we want to get rid of this guy, other teams are like, yeah, we're not going to trade you for him. You'll just let him go and we'll sign him. And if not, oh well. But yeah, it almost feels like Kupp maybe is a little salty and he can get revenge on the Rams twice a year. But I mean, I like Kupp. I think he'll do well. It'll be interesting to see him and Darnold. But yeah, I mean, the Seahawks offense with him definitely is much better than it was a day ago or a day before that trade. Because I mean, the running back room with Kenneth Walker is great. He got, I think, hurt last year, the year before, and then they have it was last year. Then they have the other running back that comes in, kind of subs for him. Oh, shoot. I had him on my fantasy team. But, yeah, it's interesting. I think the Seahawks will be – I mean, they have one of the easiest schedules coming up this year from what I've seen. And so it almost feels like they're going to get a good record. But – and, I mean, with Kupp on there and JSN, they're set up to do pretty well. But – otherwise, I mean, Najee Chargers kind of just feels like, oh, wow, Chargers have another kind of maybe good running back. I don't know. I did see and thought it was interesting. There's a bit of a running back swap between Dallas and the Panthers, with Rico Dowell going to the Panthers and Miles Sanders going to Dallas.
True.
So, interesting. Neither exactly in their prime anymore, but, I mean, might as well try out a new guy, see how he does. Otherwise, I mean, the Raiders got Raheem Mostert. I thought that was kind of interesting because Mostert was really good a few seasons ago, and then coming from the Niners before he really broke out. But then he got supplanted in Miami and is on the move. So Raiders might have a good running back next year. But we'll just have to wait
Maybe.
and see. Otherwise, yeah, Cooper Rush got signed by the Ravens, which is interesting. But
The new
otherwise,
starter. No.
yeah.
Sorry, Omar, your job's taken. But
Yep, Cooper Rush.
Tom, what did you think about the skill position maneuvers that were mentioned, along with the ones that Quinn did mention as well?
I think that one of the things I found interesting is, like, I don't know why the Rams would move on from Cup to Devontae Adams. They're around the same age. They're both, really well producing receivers in their own respect. So that kind of, not a swap because it wasn't one team to the other, but, you know, releasing Cup and having him go to the Seahawks.
He
I
basically
think,
kind of was a swap,
yeah,
just unofficially.
yeah. So yeah, seeing how Cup will do in division on the Seahawks, even though they have a lot of turnover, I think that'll be a lot of fun. Seeing how Darnold with the Vikings, he was able to do so much, maybe not in the postseason, but seeing if he can do that again with Cup will be interesting. And then Najee with the Chargers, I've had him on my fantasy the past few seasons, and there's been ups and downs with him. Some great games, some not so great. So seeing how he'll do with Harbaugh's offense, I think that could be interesting having him in there as well. And then not so much a big move, but my guy Mac Hollins having to go to the Patriots. That was a bit sad to see him go, but definitely a lot of shakeup.
Yeah, there definitely is. The Najee one specifically near dear to my heart because I'm a Steeler fan.
Mhm.
I mean, I got into a huge texting debate with my cousins about this because they love Najee and thought they should have kept him. And I could see that argument in a way. Every year he's had 1,000 yards, never was injured in his career. He started every game that he's been in the league. But the consistency to me is just not there. Like he gets 1,000 yards, but he barely just edges it over the last weeks of the season. I mean, the other argument is their O-line's not good, which our run blocking is terrible, but I just didn't like I don't think he had any burst. I don't think his speed was disappointing. The man just wanted to hurdle over everyone and almost hurt himself every time. I felt like it was time to let him go. I like our backup Warren. He does need help, but the draft, there is some good running backs that we can add, so we'd have to see about that. But in terms of the move for the Chargers, I mean, it's decent. I mean, it was weird because J.K. Dobbins had a tremendous season, so it felt like you really didn't need a running back. Maybe the history of injuries with Dobbins kind of, don't want to say scares Harbaugh, but like maybe let's add some insurance in case he gets hurt. So it's kind of, I'm not sure if Gus Edwards is still there or not, but he was kind of like a red zone threat anyways. But yeah, that's kind of like a decent move. Maybe he could be more of a red zone threat. Cup to the Seahawks, obviously the big one here. I mean, it is kind of confusing, Tom, like what you said, similar age, maybe similar skill set where they're not in their primes, but they could still produce. I feel like money might have been a big issue with both sides because the Rams had to pay Stafford, and in return, that means sorry, Cup. And Puka as well has to get paid. There's a lot of players on that team that had to get paid, so I feel like that might have been why. But yeah, we just mentioned Seattle. I mean, it was weird how at first they got Darnold, but now it seems like they justified it with Cup, and JSN has some help. So the NFC West is kind of a crapshoot to me. Obviously, that's not our division today, but it's anybody's ball game in that division to me because no one looks as strong. Like the Niners are weak, and every other team's just kind of on the up and up. So it'll be pretty unpredictable. So yeah, offensive wise, very interesting acquisitions. Moving over to the other side of the field, the defense. One of the bigger ones was Milton Williams. after helping Quinn's Eagles win the Super Bowl and being one of their best rushers. He signed a 4-year, $104 million deal with New England Patriots. I think that's well-deserved from his caliber. Josh Sweat, another Eagles player. Sorry, Quinn, you're losing a lot of guys. Signed a 4-year, $76.4 million deal with the Arizona Cardinals. Another one that I feel like was deserved. This one hits near dear to Tom's heart, because after being released by the Chargers, Joey Bosa is heading to Buffalo on a 1-year, $12.6 million deal. Quinn mentioned last week Zach Bond has been re-signed, 3 years, $51 million. Cornerbacks, Travarius Ward is going to Indy, 3-year, $54 million deal. DJ Reed, another one of the top corners, was signed in free agency, 3 years, $48 million. Javon Holland is going to the Giants on a 3-year, $45 million deal. So those were the big ones. Also, Kevontae Turpin, the speedster himself, has been re-signed to Dallas. That one isn't as big of a deal, but again, he's fast, so Jerry Jones loves that. But some moves that hit near and dear to both of you, Quinn and Tom. We'll start with Tom here. What did you think of all these defensive moves, specifically you guys getting Joey Bosa after releasing Von Miller?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the best moves that we could make in response to Von Miller leaving. As much as, when we signed Miller a few years ago, like having that name on the team, it was a big thing. He didn't produce as much as, myself and probably the rest of the fan base wanted to, as well as his off the field issues. So I think having Bosa in there as that edge rusher that we needed, I'm real happy about that. He's a lot younger than Miller. He doesn't have maybe like Miller has that edge presence, I'd say a little more. I'm really happy with that. I'm hoping it works out. And we'll see if that gets us over the hump this year.
I mean, it's at least the Bills are trying. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But Quinn, what did you think about the Bosa move and the other big defensive moves?
I like the Bosa move a lot. I think he's a great bolster. I think he's a great replacement for Von Miller. I mean, like you said, he's much younger, and so that's great. Only thing not as great as his injury history can be kind of worrisome, but I mean, that's an old team, whole new training staff here. Hopefully he stays healthy and everything. But yeah, I think it's a very good move. In regards to the Eagles, you didn't mention CJGJ going to the Texans. I can't believe you forgot that, Dylan. Wasn't more one.
That's true.
Yeah, that was interesting. There's been some drama around him, and it didn't really help the salary cap this year. In the future years, it will. And apparently that's what the Eagles and Gardner Johnson are saying, is like it's about money for the future and paying new guys, Jalen Carter, all the Georgia rookies. Well, not rookies anymore, but Georgia Bulldogs. But yeah, and with Sweat and Williams, we kind of expected to lose them. I mean, we have Jalix Hunt, the rookie, and oh no, why did I forget his name? We have another guy waiting to take over Milton's position. He's been doing pretty well. He has a higher snap or like pass rushing percentage. He's played not as many snaps as Milton did, but he's in a more Ojomo. That's right. He's in a good position, so I'm not too worried. We have guys that come up and take their place. But interesting places. I mean, Sweat rejoining Gannon in Arizona. That'll be interesting. Milton with the Patriots. I don't know if either are going to have quite as much success. I don't know. They're both very good, though. So hopefully they do well, but not my problem anymore. I'm okay with them leaving. I was more disappointed by us losing our guard, number 77, Mekhi Becton, that we got from the Jets, to the Chargers as well. But, it happens. We have Tyler Steen waiting in the back there. He battled it out with Steen for the starting guard position for this year, and Steen won, but I feel pretty good with all our backups, and of course we're stockpiling picks for the draft, so hopefully that all works out nicely.
Well, I think with Sweat and with your guys losing to Milton Williams, I mean, if you define success because you said, I don't know, they're going to be as successful, it might just be because the stats will still be there, but the teams aren't going to be as good. And maybe the coordinators aren't as strong, but they still have enough skill position, like prowess, to exceed expectations there. I mean, they got paid for a reason. I mean, money talks. Being on a great team is amazing, but you got to get your money. So, like I mentioned, it's well-deserved. I mean, the Bosa move, I like. I just hope it's not Von Miller 2.0. I know he's younger, obviously, than Von, who was like a really older veteran by the time he signed with Buffalo. It was kind of like a questionable signing from the beginning because the name is there, the name value is there, but he doesn't produce like he used to. Meanwhile, Bosa, like Quinn, you mentioned, the injury bugs. He's had a lot of season enders, so that's kind of scary. So Buffalo might have to do a little more. I mean, we'll get to the preview of what Tom thinks they should do, but maybe just keep building that defense because just these season enders have been killing. So signing an injury-prone guy, I could see why, Quinn, you would say that, but still I think it's good in terms of talent because they desperately need rushers. Travarius Ward to Indy is a good move. Indy's defense has always been kind of under the radar, so just adding another good cornerback is good. The DJ Reed move is really good considering all the injuries that the Lions had last season. It's always good to add some depth there. Holland to the Giants, another defense that I think is sneaky good, but just the offense is so ass that the poor defense has to kill themselves out there all the time. So I feel like the Giants defense is pretty especially in the secondary and linebacking positions, maybe pass rush. And even the pass rush, they have some of the best in the league. So again, that's just on the offense to have to make up for the lack of offense produced that they had last year. But yeah, very interesting moves. Before we get to the previews, I'm looking at you specifically, Quinn, because when we've met each other in person the past couple of days and we discussed the free agency moves, and you had like a little list of under the radar moves. You went team by team and saw what moves they had, but names wise, they're not going to be on the marquee, but they're low key good moves. So, do you have any other comments, Quinn, on just free agency in general? Any other names that weren't mentioned or that deserve to be mentioned?
I mean, I'll say in terms of who hasn't been moved yet, I think Aaron Rodgers is an interesting piece. Obviously great quarterback, like going to be arguably in the Hall of Fame. Maybe not as much Super Bowl playoff success as you might hope, but great player, and he's, a free agent for the first time in his career. I feel like he might have gotten a little bit of a bad rap in terms of signs, or in terms of like stats this past year, because he got hurt the first year with the Jets in like week 2 or something. I think it was against the Bills. I think
week 1 he played like 3 snaps.
Yeah. So like he had that offseason, and he came back, and he didn't do terribly. It wasn't enough to get the wins they needed to make the playoffs or anything, but and we'll talk about this a bit later, but they also had a lot of issues with firing administrative positions and coaches in this past season for the Jets. So it kind of was a weird, rocky start, and didn't help that the Jets have a really good roster overall. I mean, the defense should be really good. The offense, it should be really good as well, but things just didn't line up for them this season. But regardless, Rodgers didn't have great numbers, but like better than average for the league and the quarterbacks. And I'm sure there's a lot of teams that he very well could be starting for. But it'll be interesting to see actually where he goes and how that all works out. Overall, I feel like this offseason here with all these trades and signings haven't been quite as interesting as past seasons. I feel like there haven't been any blockbuster moves. I mean, the Myles Garrett title was like, oh, that's going to be the huge move. Like, oh, who's going to get him? And then he just stays. And it feels like there are the big guys moving around. If you want to say like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat are big because they won the Super Bowl, like they moved around. But I feel like there's not like, oh my God, wait, he left? Like there's some surprising ones, but nothing, no like huge blockbuster trades, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree, but I still think there are some big names and name value to be on the move. With the Rodgers deal, I mean, you can look at again right at my team as one of the top teams for him to head to. It's a little bit weird how we haven't heard anything, but then yet again, it's Aaron Rodgers. That man, he needs all the attention. He needs the headlines to speculate for weeks on end before he makes a decision. He's been doing this crap for 3 straight years now. I don't know if you two saw the picture of Rodgers on the beach with like some blanket on and earbuds, looking like he was contemplating. It looks like it was a version of a darkness retreat, but beach version, just walking around in a private beach like, where should I go? Or should I retire? Again, just weird stuff and vibes from him, but I believe he met with all the candidates, the Steelers, the Giants, and I believe he met with Minnesota, and Russ is also meeting up with the Giants and the Vikings as well. So it's a matter of who's going to who. I mean, personally, I do not want that type of personality in Rodgers to go to Pittsburgh, even if skill-wise he's better than Russ. I keep saying it, but just because of the Metcalf move, feel like Russ is kind of due to stay in Pittsburgh just because of the chemistry that they have and because of the leadership that he brings. I feel like Russ is a much better leader. He could be corny and cringy, but I will take that over Rodgers' weird opinions about medical sciences any day of the week or him on the McAfee show every week. So, yeah, I don't know where Rodgers goes if he completes the Brett Favre arc, or if somehow he just stays up the road in New York. He just stays at the State Stadium and the Giants. But Tom, we'll get your input on Rodgers. What's your take on the fact that we haven't heard anything yet?
Like you were saying, it is typical of him, this kind of silence and ambiguity in what's going on. I know towards the last few weeks of the season, or right after it ended, I was hearing things of him saying how he would stay with the Jets to, if they drafted someone to mentor a young quarterback. But with them picking up Justin Fields, that doesn't seem likely anymore, that they would need him in that capacity. So personally, I thought he would have retired by now. I didn't think that he would be meeting with these teams, seeing if he would be, playing for another year or two. I thought he would kind of call it quits after this. I'm interested to see what happens if he does go, like if he does stay in New York, just with the Jets or the Giants, excuse me. Or after all this, speculation by everyone, if he does just hang it up and retreat into the dark or wherever he prefers now, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wish he would just ride off the sunset, but that man is just so desperate for a Super Bowl. So who knows? The future is in limbo for him, but it's time to move on from him and free agency and move on to our traditional AFC East review. Like I said, we will go over teams. So Tom will obviously be going over his team in Buffalo, and Quinn and I are going to, we still haven't officially came up with who we're going to do yet, but we're going to do the other teams. And it's basically the format is we review the season, some of their best wins, some of their worst losses, like the key moments in the seasons, and then discuss what should be improved upon by their teams here. So we're going to start with the special guest himself. I'm sorry you got to talk about your heartbreaking season again, Tom, but take it away here. The floor is yours. Go ahead and talk about the Buffalo Bills for you.
Of course, I'm happy with how the season went. Not happy with how it ended by any means. But going into this past year, like a lot of people, I didn't expect as much as we've gotten the past few years. Of course, big names leaving like Diggs and Gabe Davis from the receiver room that was a bit, I don't know if I'd say of a shock. Of course, you're always going to make moves that as a fan, you don't want to see. I didn't know early on if that would be a downfall of ours or not. And obviously it wasn't. Josh did what he did, and I'm sorry for doubting him. I didn't think that he would do what he did, but I was wrong. But no, I think the season went just about as well as it could. Of course, the early losses to the Texans and then Baltimore back to back, that was, all of us were nervous if they were going to continue to slip down a slope. Like they were on a high the first few weeks and then it would kind of descend, and that's where we would be the rest of the season. But no, I think even with some injuries on the defense, Milano being out since the start of the season, Terrell Bernard in and out of injury, Taron Johnson, there are a lot of instances where, as a Bills fan, I get nervous because before Josh, it was all 6-win, 7-win seasons. So I'm always in that mindset of when we lose a game that I feel we should win or a few injuries occur, I'm feeling myself go back to those years of no hope, it seems. I think they did the best that they could with the pieces they had. I think, we got to see a lot of new faces like Ty Johnson. Not that he hasn't been any part of a factor in the last few years, but seeing him really, take a lead role behind James Cook was great. Seeing, Keon Coleman didn't do the best, but, as a rookie receiver, he did what he had to, made some great plays and some big time moments. But overall, I was really happy. The playoffs were the playoffs, as they always are. Kansas City is always our crutch then. But, getting past Baltimore to get to play the Chiefs, that was a big win for us. And, I'm excited to see what Josh continues to do next year, how the defense looks, hoping people can stay healthy, hoping, Bosa plays a role and doesn't have his injuries that he's been prone to in the past. But I feel really good now. I'm not going to have the idea of a Super Bowl in the back of my head like everyone keeps saying every year, because invariably it hasn't worked out, and that's been a bit disappointing. But I'm hoping that this team from now on will be the old Patriots with Tom Brady, and we'll just win the division, have a spot in the playoffs every year, and hopefully we'll get it done soon.
I mean, the man got paid. Allen got paid a rancid.
Yeah. I mean, I think Allen kind of surprised us all this season, because I know I wasn't quite, well, I was discouraged by Diggs leaving and Gabe Davis too, and I'm like, what receivers? Like, what's going to happen? I mean, I thought Shakir had potential, but I didn't quite think he could be a number one. And I mean, Allen just balled out, got MVP, and just showed us as like, oh yeah, I am just him. I'm just great. Which I'm sure is very reassuring for you, Tom, because it's like, oh, okay, that's good. Our quarterback can just carry the team if we need him. That's nice to know. But yeah, I think definitely good season. I mean, disappointing, but I mean, AFC Championship game is at least he made it a bit further this year and made it back there, and maybe a little bit questionable end to the game, but that happens. But I was curious. I had Dalton Kincaid as my tight end in fantasy this year. I know it's kind of there's jumping between them in the past has kind of been like, oh, Kincaid's like the rookie, he's going to do well, and then Dawson Knox is there, and he's kind of doing well too. But I was curious, from your perspective, who do you like one better than the other? Do you think one is there one that's just better overall that, like, not watching the games I don't really notice as much, or do you have any, I guess, opinions on the two?
Um, yeah, I definitely, I think they're both great tight ends. Um, Knox is definitely a much better blocking tight end than Kincaid is, and I think he's just a little bigger than Dalton is. But in terms of one over the other, I don't know if there's a definitive, and one or two. In my mind, it still is Dawson Knox. I feel like this past season, Kincaid had, a few more drops, a few more uh, route running issues. And of course, he's still young. That's all going to get ironed out. He'll probably hit the gym, get bigger, become a better uh, blocking tight end. But, it's not definitive. But for me, I think right now, Knox is still tight end one. He's had some injuries in the past that have taken him out, and Kincaid has been kind of pushed into it. Um, and I do think Dalton's great, and he'll just keep getting better. But right now, it's either of them. It seems they both come in and out pretty regularly. Um, I think they're trying to give Kincaid a little more time to push him and make him the eventual number one, but it doesn't seem right now that there's a certainty either way.
I feel like one matches the other in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Like you said, Knox better blocking receiver, Kincaid better just like receiving tight end. And I
Mhm.
feel like they want Kincaid to be the best of both worlds, but it just hasn't clicked yet. Like you said, Kincaid had some big drops, specifically the AFC Championship one was the devastating one where Allen threw up that miracle. But he's still young. I feel like it takes a while, especially for tight ends to develop and become their own. So I feel like that's the type of thing that you got to give it some time. But in terms of the draft coming up here, Tom, are there any positions or skills that you think Buffalo needs to focus on come late April?
Like if I had any say in the draft board, which may not be a good idea if they take my advice, I think definitely an edge rusher would be a big one. With the Bosa signing, if he's healthy, that's great. But inevitably, if he's not, someone needs to fill that hole for him. And we have some good backups, but I think having a big, fresh out of, like, if we followed the Eagles and take a Georgia rusher or something similar, that would be great. But besides that, maybe a cornerback to be opposite of Christian Benford. I think, Benford was great last year. But, on the opposite end of the field, there wasn't always a consistent second cornerback to be that guy. Um, I think, a receiver would be nice. I know we just signed Josh Palmer from the Chargers as well. Um, and I believe we still have Amari Cooper. Maybe I'm wrong.
I
Um,
think so.
yeah, but having, a strong receiving core is still something that we need. Like we have good receivers, but having, you know, one more is always great. My only issue with that is if we did get another rookie receiver, then you have a rookie and Keon Coleman who's a second year, Dalton Kincaid who's I think going to be in his third year. So it'd be a young receiving room, but I think that they'd be able to develop fairly easily. Um, but I think besides those positions, I feel pretty confident. We just extended Terrell Bernard. Um, I think re-signed DeMar Hamlin, who stepped up last year. Um, so I think just those three that's what I'm hoping to see.
Yeah, I feel like specifically your running back position's all good. James Cook did very well, just over 1,000 yards, but 16 touchdowns, and plus Allen helps a lot with the rushing, so you're kind of set there. It's just interesting the young receivers you have, but it almost feels like you don't need a star receiver. I think it would help for Allen, but it's clear that they can make it pretty far without one. Maybe if they need, I don't know whether there's a lot of speedy receivers in the draft, whether Buffalo needs something like that, or if they're just relying on Coleman to develop. But I do think defense, I think I agree with you. It definitely needs a bolster. It definitely needs depth. Just some of your injuries, like one of your corners was hurt in the AFC Championship game. That killed you right there. And yeah, just the Milano, again, just being injury prone doesn't help. So yeah, it's very interesting with Buffalo. They're in this period where they're going to compete. Like, I think this season proved they're not going anywhere. That the fact that they completely like surprised us getting to how far they got. So I think as long as number 17 on that jersey is healthy, they're not going anywhere. It's just a matter of what they do in January is what matters. The coach is what interests me the most here because McDermott's kind of been like in the media hot and cold. Obviously, he had that whole 9/11 speech thing a couple years ago. That interesting. But if he's about your coach, McDermott, are you a fan of his or are you not the biggest fan of his? Is he a non-factor? What do you think about him?
I've heard a lot both ways. I'm in favor of him. I like him as a coach. I think it was a good idea for him to step down on the defensive play calling last year, 2 years ago. I think that was a good move to have him just being the head coach and just focusing solely on that. But I think seeing him in the locker room, how all the players seem to really love him, how he, wants to give his all to them. I think that is a big factor for why I like him. Of course, he's gotten this team to where they are now. Him and Brandon Beane, and so I think losing either in the AFC Championship wild card or whatnot every year and not making it to Super Bowl is a big reason for a lot of people, a lot of Bills fans to want to move on from him. But I think having him and being there, they were the ones who drafted Josh, kind of built the team to where they are now. I think, I'm in favor of him staying. I don't know how much longer, but I think he's a great guy, a really good coach, and I'm happy if he stays here for another several years, I think.
Well, team camaraderie and morale matters, and the locker room morale matters. And I feel like it's pretty good in Buffalo. And I feel like, despite any interesting speeches that he said in the past, I feel like he guides them right. So I'm with you there. So good intake there on the Buffalo Bills there. Very impressive first appearance, Tom. I give you 10 out of 10. I believe Quinn would too on your analysis. We certainly aren't the biggest professionals, especially me. Look, I'm eating my dinner and my TV went to crap. So we're work in progress for that. But speaking of us being so professionals, we were so focused on you talking about your teams. Me and Quinn never discussed what teams we wanted. So I'm going to allow you, Quinn, to be next and choose what team you want to do next. And then I'll go and then decide for who's the last team in that division, what we want to do. But take it away, Quinn.
All right. Well, I was going to say I'll take the Jets because I know in the past you've talked favorably about the Dolphins, or at least when we've talked about like Tua and Waddle.
Don't talk
Waddle
about my
Smith.
division prediction.
Yeah, I figured you take the Dolphins. I'll take the Jets since you think so highly of the Dolphins, particularly maybe last season.
Sure. Sounds like a plan.
I'll take the New Jersey Jets. So the Jets had an interesting season. We talked about it a little bit before with Aaron Rodgers. His first fully healthy season with the Jets, which didn't really turn out exactly how they wanted. They came third in the division with a record of 5-12, which is pretty bad and pretty disappointing for the Jets fans, especially considering you have a Super Bowl winning quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Famer, yeah, and great defense. Sauce Gardner, you have a good offense. I mean, Rodgers, you have Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson made an absolutely incredible catch, crazy, but and then Conklin, not bad, serviceable tight ends, but the Jets look to be set up for some success and maybe making the playoffs. I think that might have been one of my predictions. Unfortunately, that was wrong. But yeah, they had a disappointing season. They fired Robert Saleh, their head coach, after a 2-3 start, so week 6, between week 5 and 6. And that was after the loss to the Vikings, 23-17. And they fired him right in time to lose to the Bills in week 6. But, yeah, then not long afterwards, they fired their GM, Joe Douglas. And there's all these jokes about, is Aaron Rodgers just running the team? Maybe he is. I don't know. But they weren't even close to the playoffs. Disappointing season. I mean, I believe Aaron Rodgers got injured and came back, but regardless, it didn't matter. The defense was just bad this season, even though they're supposed to be great and they had the defensive-minded head coach. It felt kind of weird to fire your head coach 5 games in. It seems like something they're thinking about doing before the season, and then just 2-3, which, I mean, to be fair, isn't an atrocious record. I mean, you're below 50%, but yeah, it's not great. They lost to the Niners. That's not surprising. We all thought the Niners were going to be pretty good this year. Turns out not, which, I mean, I'm so unhappy about. But yeah, losing the Broncos 10-9. It was just disappointing. Being blown out by the Steelers 37-15. They did keep it competitive with the Bills in week 6, 23-20, but they got blown out at the end of the season 40-14 against the Bills. It was just a disappointing season. Losing their coach and quarterback just kind of, I feel like, threw out any chance of winning or having a winning season or the playoffs just out of the window. It's just, yeah. And then now Justin Fields, I mean, if I was a Jets fan, I'd be pretty disappointed considering it's like, oh, we're going to get a new quarterback. Who's it going to be? And it's just like, oh, it's this guy who I did well last year for the Steelers, but got benched in Chicago. Now, he's a very good running back, but quarterback, I don't know. But the Jets haven't been doing well recently. I mean, they've been encouraged by having a good roster, but I don't know. It feels like a rather weird collapse that happened this year. Next year, they should be set up in better position. I mean, I don't think they lost anyone significant in free agency. I also don't think they really signed anyone either, to be fair. And besides Fields, but I mean, I think Fields is definitely a downgrade from Rodgers, but I mean, they got more wins with Zach Wilson than Aaron Rodgers. So who knows? Maybe they just like having kind of just bad quarterbacks, and maybe that's what they feed off of. But it feels like they're still definitely on the hunt for the guy, and until they get that, I don't know how far they get, or even if they can get a playoff win if they're lucky. But we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. They can try and address some of their issues in the draft. Maybe they try and get a quarterback, but it's not deep at all. So,
yeah, it's just very underwhelming era of Aaron Rodgers. And just, I mean, Super Bowl aspirations might have been a bold thing to say back when he signed, but Jets fans really believe in it. And it just turned into, like I said earlier, the Jets just stench of just cursing, and they just always suck no matter who they get. It's Brett Favre 2.0 when he was on the Jets for a season and did nothing and left. So, yeah, it's pretty insane. But going specifically into the draft, Quinn, like you said, like besides Rodgers, Devontae, and then they added Fields, they didn't really lose too many in the skills. But who do you think the Jets need to get in the draft to improve?
Well, I mean, I think getting a quarterback would be good, but I don't know if it's really worth it in this draft. Maybe later on, maybe if they can get like Quinn Ewers in the second round and try and develop him a bit. Then again, the quarterback draft isn't great. My good friends at PFF say that they could also use a wide receiver, tackle, or defensive lineman. I mean, building the trenches is always a good idea. I saw a lot of articles online of like the Eagles beat the Chiefs with their line, and it's like teams should be following this like what the Eagles do to draft defensive linemen. And I mean, if it works, it works. But I don't know. The Jets O-line, for now I know, isn't terrible, but not exactly great. And it never hurts to get another offensive tackle. It may be boring, but it protects your quarterback. So that way, when you get a good one, he won't have to scramble around like Justin Fields will, just because he is Justin Fields. But I mean, a second wide receiver to complement Wilson could be nice. But Wilson seems to not really have any trouble getting open on the double teams or making those plays. But yeah, they have the 7th pick. We'll have to see what they do. They have some options, but who knows? Maybe they'll take a tight end. There's 2 very good tight ends in the draft this year, so we'll have to see. But Tom, I wanted to ask your opinion from a Bills fan perspective. Yeah. What do you think of the Jets? What's your opinion?
I think every year there's always like a close game with the Jets, and this follows along with the Dolphins or the Patriots. I think that they can play well. I think their defense is always something that makes me a little nervous at times. You know, with Gardner, you have the Williams brothers, and I think C.J. Mosley. They have a good defense, and you know it can at times get Josh rattled or the best of the receivers. But yeah, right now I think if Rodgers leaves and they have Fields, they just need, I think at this point, any talent they can get, preferably for them. I think, like you said, a lineman or a tackle or something to protect Fields, but I really don't know what the future looks like for the Jets. They don't seem certain about much right now.
Yeah, they certainly don't. Before we get too much further in the teams, I wanted to ask so like the Eagles, Cowboys are the biggest rivalry, like Steelers, Ravens. Is there a big 1-2 like rivalry with the Bills, or is it just kind of a evenly spread out maybe?
I think in recent years, with the rest of the division, you know, being decent but nothing great, it is kind of just you play the division teams, and that is the rival that week. I think in the past, of course, it was the Patriots, but it wasn't really a rivalry that was very one-sided for us. But I think personally for me, like the rivalry is the Dolphins. It was a big thing in the 90s, you know, squish the fish. That's still a big thing that we all say.
I like it.
Yeah, so probably the Dolphins, but I feel comfortable with each team that, you know, it's not a true rivalry anymore.
Good to
also,
know.
Interesting fact with the Jets is Aaron Glenn, obviously their new head coach, used to be a player on the Jets, I believe in the 90s. So it's kind of like a welcome home thing to there. So maybe he'll improve that defense as well. But it's time to move on to me, the most important guy on the podcast, besides Tom, of course. Quinn doesn't deserve to be mentioned. But
wow.
Yes, it's time to talk about the Miami Dolphins. And underwhelming could be like the best word to describe it. But I would just say the best way to describe their season is it was a lost season. Like it kind of gave me 49ers vibes in terms of injuries galore that just crushed the team. Obviously, like the big elephant in the room is Tua needs to stay healthy because that man is diving headfirst into people's helmets and getting concussed. He dove headfirst against the Bills, Damar Hamlin, ironically, and was unconscious on the field. And then in some game against the Rams, I think when he came back, threw a pick, tries to make a tackle head first. And then Tua decided not to wear the protective gear on the helmet, which people didn't like. It was just that alone kind of ended it. When your season starts with your star receiver getting pulled over before the game, then your season might be in shambles. And yeah, it just was. It seems like the cold factor and the playing against real teams factor stayed with Miami. You could basically say it's hard to say a worse loss because once Tua got hurt, it was just tough to rebound from that because they went from 1-0 and winning to 2-6 once he got hurt. But obviously, you probably have to go to that Thursday night game in week 2 against the Bills when he got hurt as the worst loss, just because their season was kind of screwed. They had a little bit of a bounce back streak against kind of easier teams, but then you could say they ended the season on a high-ish. They went into week 18 with a slim but chance to make the playoffs, but then they lost to the Jets and it got to the point where they had 4 starting quarterbacks throughout the whole season, and none of the 3 backups were good. And that's what Miami should maybe in the offseason improve upon, is getting a quality backup, because Tyler Huntley couldn't cut it starting 5 games, but throwing 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. And then Skylar Thompson played 3 games, and Tim Boyle played 2. Neither of them threw touchdowns. So, yeah, I think... And that really declined Tyreek's season. He didn't even get 1,000 yards and only 6 touchdowns. Jonnu Smith got the most touchdowns for Miami. Yes, Jonnu Smith. Sorry, the former Falcon. That's so wild I was choking up because he had 8 touchdowns. Jalen Waddle, another kind of underwhelming season, only 2 touchdowns, 744 yards. The defense was just kind of there. They lost a lot of pieces before the season even started. Obviously, they still have Jalen Ramsey. Jordan Poyer did okay for them, but yeah, just overall, the Tua injury was the difference. There's no 2 ways about it. Now, who knows where Miami would have been with a fully healthy Tua, just because this team could be very hot and cold, literally, because, like I mentioned, cold weather, they seem to stink. But yeah, it's tough to know where you go from here because you extended Tua. So you're really kind of stuck with him. He's got talent, but I don't know if he has the health or consistency. The skill positions are there. A-Chain's incredible. They had the weird Tyreek thing where he wanted traded, but I haven't really heard a lot about that. It's kind of quieted down. I feel like that was just a tantrum thrown by him. I don't really see him going anywhere. And Waddle, as underwhelming as he was, still name-wise, he's a good receiver. And Jonnu Smith had a complete surprise of the year. So offense, they're good. Defense can maybe improve, especially the pass rush. But there's some decent guys, like I mentioned in the draft. Mike McDaniel has been an interesting personality. The man's press conferences are must-watch. Another guy that's kind of should he be on the hot seat? It's definitely hotter now than in previous seasons. Obviously, they should and will give him a chance. He's an offensive, I wouldn't say mastermind, but he knows how to make Tua in the offense good to its best ability. But if there's more seasons like this, he might not last much longer. So, yeah, just injury-riddled, just a lost season for Miami. But we're going to ask Tom first. What did you think? Obviously, as a Bills fan, you're pleased by that. But what did you think overall of Miami's season?
Yeah, like you're saying, it did seem like a lost season. They have a lot of really good talent right now. But again, keeping Tua, you're kind of putting yourself in a box of, okay, he's the guy. Where are we going to go from here? Because each year it seems with injury or whatnot, they always stall out. And so it is, I don't know. I can't predict where they're going to be next year, in the next 2 years or whatnot. I do think keeping McDaniel is a good idea for now, him having the rapport that he has with Tua. But yeah, as a Bills fan, I am happy, but I don't know what's to come of the Dolphins. I think they, for me, have the biggest question mark in terms of what the production is going to look like.
I definitely agree with that. Quinn, what did you think about the 8-9 Dolphins season?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because we took Vic Fangio from the Dolphins, and he worked great for us, number one defense in the league. But there's reports that the Dolphins players like didn't like him and like thought he was too like tough and like mean, and like the Eagles put out a YouTube video of like him answering questions, and he was like, he pulled up a question, he's like, yeah, just like chucked it. He just seems like the typical like old guy, just like, yeah, I don't care about that. I'm just gonna do this instead. Like just kind of maybe a little more gruff, a little more tough, but like he knows what he's doing. And there's some reports of like the Dolphins players were kind of like pansies about him, like, oh no, he's mean, he's not very nice. I don't like him. And I mean, their defense last year with him wasn't. I think it was like average. So I mean, clearly we can see what he can do. And I mean, obviously the Eagles have talent. I mean, Jalen Carter's great, but I don't know. I feel like that kind of says something about the Dolphins locker room or the players. It seems a little. Maybe that ties into the coldness, because like clearly that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, Tampa Bay doesn't have that problem. I mean, they played the Commanders in the playoffs, and I mean they lost, but they played a good game. I mean, Jags, I mean they're just not great in general. But you don't be like, oh no, the Jags are going to Seattle, they're screwed because of the cold. You know, it just seems like there's something up with the culture that kind of needs fixing with the cold. I don't know, but yeah, this season. It almost feels like they need to move on from Tua. Like, he has the talent, but
wow,
it's just gone wrong because he just gets the concussions. And I don't know, after the first two, now it kind of seems like he's just making bad decisions with that. Like, diving into Damar Hamlin and like, oh, look, I threw a pick. Let me just tackle him head first. Like, you can't do that. You have to be more careful now. Concussions aren't a joke. I mean, you see what happens to Antonio Brown. He just went, like, literally crazy because
stop.
too much. Stop. And so, like, it almost seems like
stupid award shows.
Yeah, Tua just needs to retire, maybe. I don't know, just for his own health. But it doesn't seem. I mean, McDaniels seems to be a pretty good coach, at least play calling wise. But maybe this is the time. I don't know. I mean, they always, like you and Tom said, it always seems to be like they just kind of like fall apart at some point, and it just doesn't work out. And you can't have your quarterback just getting injured all the time because he makes bad decisions about concussions. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I think just a team that predicates on speed, going back to the cold, I think it gets weaker when it's the cold weather. Like, a lot of teams obviously rely on speed, but this team basically like lives or dies by that in their offensive production. And when you don't have like a toughness to you in terms of the defense or anything like that, or a tough-minded coach, no disrespect to guys like McDaniel, but it's true, you're going to lose in the cold. I mean, the game that stuck out to me in terms of that was the Thanksgiving game at Green Bay at Lambeau. It was freezing. Tua was back by then. They were riding off the streak. And it looked like, oh, shit, here we go again. They looked terrible in the cold weather in a big game, just like Kansas City last year in the wild card game. So I don't know what it's going to take. You almost feel like Miami's regretting to at least for that money to re-sign Tua. I mean, he's a startable quarterback. and he fits that roster well. It's just, again, the decision making has just killed this organization, and it might still continue to linger for years to come. But yeah, just disappointment besides Tom's team, just all around the AFC East. And we're going to end with a disappointment. This one, though, a little more expected and not as terrible, I would say, is the New England Patriots here. Basically, since all three of us went over a team, we'll just all give input on the Patriots overall and their seasons here. Maybe I could probably, talk more on a general basis. Quinn, you could get more specific with players and worst wins and losses. And then we can all see, Tom, you, and then even the rest of us too could talk about what they need to do upcoming. So we're so professional, aren't we? To start off,
absolutely.
To start off here in a more general consensus, I mean, it was a bad year, but I feel like Pats fans don't mind that. A lot of fan bases like theirs, they're willing to sacrifice that for good draft picks. And now they have the, I believe, third overall pick, which is a very good spot. Fourth, sorry. I forgot about the Giants because they're just too forgettable. But
I forget about them too.
Yeah, but still, very good position. I will say they crushed Cincy's hopes and dreams in week 1, beating them, and that was the reason they couldn't make the playoffs. But I mean, the big thing obviously it was Drake May's rookie year, but overall in terms of just the team itself, the O-line was horrible. I mean, any QB that started would have struggled, let alone a rookie. He just had May had no time at all, and the defense had its spurts, but still needs work, especially because the offense just can't stay on the field at all. I mean, yeah, basically that's just the general thing with the Patriots. I mean, Mike Vrabel being the new coach, bringing that toughness, tough-minded, cold weather type of coach to them. It's kind of weird. I'm a little skeptical sometimes on that because, again, my Steelers have a bunch of old school coaches with Tomlin and Arthur Smith with ground and pound. I don't know if that type of play registers in today's NFL. It could if you do it correctly. So I'm skeptical, but Vrabel has proven to be a very good coach with the Titans. And he made that ground and pound offense work, but the Pats don't have a Derrick Henry. They're going to have to get themselves one. So, but yeah, just an expected bad year, but I think Pats fans will just forget about it and just be like, all right, at least we got our future at least. But Quinn, moving on with you, getting more details about the Pats 4-13 season.
Well, first I wanted to mention, because you're talking about Vrabel, I think he's a really good hire. I mean, he has that hard, gritty mindset, and Gerard Mayo kind of felt like a bit of a weird pick of oh, look, here's a player we have. We're just going to make him a coach, and I'm sure Tom can talk about that later.
Hey, Vrabel was a former player too, to be fair.
Yeah. That's true, but he is better than Mayo. I've heard some interesting things about Mayo in the locker room and not being the greatest leader, but I think they made a damn good choice there for their new coach. And then I like Drake May. I think he's going to turn out pretty well. He had definitely some flashes this year. I think with the right development and actually getting more lineman help and weapons, I think he could be really good. But yeah, they had a bit of a streak in the middle of the season. I know the Jags-Patriots game in London stood out to me. I mean, the Jags finally won the game in their international game because they were for 2 weeks. But yeah, it felt like, oh, they have a chance. Oh, they can come back. And then they just didn't. And they got some garbage time points and touchdowns. But that was probably one of the more disappointing losses. I mean, at this point with a 4-13 season, I feel like it's less about which losses are disappointing and which wins that you have that you can be like, we won that. That's great. And then they can go and rewatch their Super Bowl highlights and maybe feel an ounce of joy again. But yeah, I think another loss that stood out to me was they lost to the Colts by 1 point on the 1st of December, actually. But week 13, I believe. But it's such a close loss when like you're just hoping to win games at this point is tough. But then they also, I believe they lost the first round pick when they beat the Bears in November. I
And the
believe,
Bills too in the last
Mhm.
week of the year, they kind of
yeah,
fell.
right. So they kind of sacrificed the number one pick. We talked about that a bit before with the Giants just choking away the first pick in the draft. And I mean, to be honest, Patriots don't need the first pick. They have a quarterback, so they're not really concerned about that. I mean, I'm sure they would have loved Abdul Carter at number one pick, but at number four, they still very well might get him. Especially the Giants will be taking quarterback. Arguably, the Texans or the Titans might be taking one of the Browns. Either the Titans or Browns. I think definitely one's taking a quarterback, but the Patriots are still going to get a good player, even if it's Travis Hunter. But I mean, they need wide receiver and running back as well as O line. So I mean, Travis Hunter could be great. I mean, it's never
They need
bad
a
to have
lot.
more
They need a
cornerbacks.
lot.
So he could be a great pick, but they're still sitting pretty well in the draft. But yeah, I mean, I don't think any Patriots fans expected a lot from this season. Maybe they had some hope, but overall, I mean, they have a high pick. I think the best thing was Drake May showing promise and getting Vrabel. I think they have a pretty decent outlook for this next season. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what happens, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the draft too. Who they get.
Another headline too is Josh McDaniels for like the fourth
Mm.
time is
Yep.
back in the Patriots as a coordinator. So that'll be interesting. It seems like coordinator should just be his job and stop trying to be a head coach. But Tom, what did you think about the season and just like who they should draft specifically, and just who they need, and just overall your thoughts on the Pats?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean, this did seem just like a season that they had nothing of real note. Having Gerard Mayo as the head coach, it was definitely an interesting move. It seemed that they knew they weren't going to be doing a whole lot, and they just, wanted to try it out, just have some fun with it. Um, Even though, the season wasn't that fun for them. I don't know. Um, but I'm very high on Drake May. I think he will be good as long as they give him the protection, maybe, a receiving weapon or two. But I like his game a lot. I think in the next few seasons he'll be the one to give the Bills the run for their money. Um, but yeah, I think there's just so much right now that they need. It's hard to, really make much headway. I think they had the number one pick in week 18, and when they beat us, they went to 4. And like you were saying, they don't need number one. They don't need to take a quarterback. But I think it would have been good, leverage to make a good trade to get, for someone to jump to the number one, and you get a lot out of that. I think and of course, they're not going to throw away the last game of the season to do that. But I think that would have helped them quite a bit to, get really high talent in the draft in the first few rounds instead of, just having number 4, which, hopefully they can make something out of it. But I can't say too much on their season. It didn't seem remarkable in any sense. A lot of close losses. Um, but yeah, I don't really know where they're going.
How do you feel about the
Yeah,
Vrabel hiring?
The what?
The Vrabel hiring. Do you like that? What do
Oh,
you think?
I think it could definitely work out for them. His time in Tennessee, um, I think he coached the team well. I think he, like you said, he has that grittiness to him that the team needs, coming out of this 4-win season. I think he'll do what he can, pick them up, get them motivated again. I think it will work, but it still comes down a lot to who they draft and how much they can, you know, get in the remainder free agency. And um, yeah.
yeah, I think in terms of if we're going to go specific draft-wise, like we mentioned, it's kind of unclear. They need everything. But go into our friend PFF, which Quinn and I love, and I definitely recommend people use that. It's one of the best like football analysis and focus type of websites. So they obviously added in Milton Williams, and they added a lot of others on the defense. That's what Vrabel's known for. Seems like defense is all set. So offense is really what they should be going for in the draft. And there's plenty of receivers that they can get. Obviously, the big one is Travis Hunter, the receiver and cornerback, and kind of like the controversy of, is he going to play both positions? Is he just going to play one? I think he says he's going to try to play both. Will that register well in the NFL against elite teams? I don't know. But yeah, there's plenty of like decent receivers, but I think they need to protect their quarterback. I think their line was the worst by a mile in the season, and you want to keep Drake May healthy. I think there's plenty of receivers. I don't think a guy like Travis Hunter, even if he's available, is necessary. The rush from Penn State would be nice, but I just, again, not really needed because their defense is still like pretty decent. I think we need to protect their quarterback. So I think you could just search for offensive weapons more in the middle rounds, pretty much. So there's a couple I don't have specifically off the top of my head, but I definitely think that there could be some intriguing options in the draft in the future for the Patriots. So yeah, just build around Drake May to see specifically alignment would probably be the way to go for me. But do you two have any input on that? Like, you think they should go another direction?
No, I think that probably is where they need to start. That's the number one priority.
Build the trenches.
Yeah.
I love it.
It matters. It matters. It can make or break a franchise. Like, there's not a lot of Allens and Mahomes in the world to kind of make up for a bad O-line, and even then, most of them have at least decent lines. So good that we agree with that. But that's going to do it here for this rendition of the DQ Frenzy. Thank you again to our special guest, Tom. You did an excellent job. Round of applause to you. You did a heck of a job here. Maybe one day in the future you'll come back here, maybe when the Bills are playing games and maybe winning again to give you hope. So maybe you could be optimistic about a Super Bowl in Buffalo. Yeah. But like I said, thank you again for joining. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Hope you guys had a great St. Patrick's Day weekend, showing off my St. Patrick's Day merch. If any of you care about it, I certainly do. But have a good week, guys. We'll see you right back here next week.
See you guys.